There's something both scary and exciting about starting a new sketchbook. It's always hard to make that first mark on a page. In this video, I'm going to be starting a new sketchbook. I have a lot of sketchbooks, so sometimes it's a little hard for me to decide which one I should use. But in this one, I wanted to start a new watercolor sketchbook. These are custom made, and they're made out of actual old books, which I just thought was the coolest thing. I love the watercolor texture of the paper. But for the first page of this sketchbook, I decided I wanted to do a little bit of mixed media. So some watercolor, but also a little bit of collage, blackout poetry, I think. You'll see how it unfolds in this video. So starting off here, I'm just looking at things that I've collected over time, like newspaper clippings. I'm really drawn to words, so whenever I find interesting headlines, it's often an inspiration for me for the spread. I also have some old ephemera, which I've actually had a hard time using. It's so beautiful and I don't want to cut it up and use it just yet, but one day I will find a project that I can use these beautiful pieces in. So starting with the first page here, I was drawn to using the newspaper title, "Wait Till Next Year." I think this kind of encompasses a lot of things that are going on in my mind these days. I consider myself a pretty patient person, but I think everyone can relate to how the world has felt on pause over the last year and a half. Maybe still, maybe not. So this concept of patience and waiting is something I wanted to explore. I also wanted to do a piece of blackout poetry. I've actually created a short video on how to do blackout poetry, so if this is something you're interested in, I will link that video below so you can check it out. But basically, how it goes is you're starting with a piece of paper that has words. So you could tear something out of a book, it could be from a magazine, you can type up something, you can really get creative with where these words are coming from. For me, I'm using a page out of an old book that I bought actually from London, and I'm just using that as a start for the poetry. I love using these chapter pages because at the top you have a chapter and usually some kind of enticing title, and it just aesthetically, I like the way it looks to have this, especially since it's going to be the first page of this sketchbook. And so from here, what you do is you start to underline some of your favorite words or phrases, whatever stands out at you. I recommend using a pencil for this so you can make marks, erase, because you will probably change your mind as the poem evolves. So starting off, some of the words or phrases that I underlined were, "There was no doubt," "The world lay very still," "Perfect," "Menace," "Damage would be done," "But she was restless," "Waited for the storm to break," "She missed," "Her own carelessness," "Now and then," "She hoped," "A good deal." So these are just words that I thought could potentially make an interesting poem. And so from there, I take a piece of paper and I start writing out those phrases and looking at it as if it were a complete poem. Does this make sense? So here I'm starting to select like, oh, I don't actually really like this line, or I like this, but maybe I want to cross off a word. This helps me write the poem, essentially. So you see, as I was starting to put these together, I crossed off she and they were apart. I didn't feel like that line went with what the rest of the poem was saying. And then I go over those same lines again, just to reinforce that those are the lines that I want to black out before I start actually taking a black marker and filling the space around those words. But before I start blacking out the poem, I want to lay out a color wash on my sketchbook page. So I'm taking my watercolors And I'm using a couple of different colors. I'm starting off with a red for the top of the wash, and I'm just using a round brush to fill the page with color. Nothing special here, just the point of it is to create a background for my blackout poem. For the second color, I wanted to go with a shade of blue, and for the third and final color, this dark purplish bluish color. So once I was done with that, I left it off to the side to let it dry and continued with the blackout poem. And so now that I have the words that I want blacked out outlined in pencil, I'm erasing all of the other lines so I don't accidentally include those. And then I tested a few different black markers, but I ended up just going with an old-fashioned Sharpie marker and using that to draw a box around those words and phrases so that I don't accidentally go over those as I'm doing the blackout part, which I have done before. Once that step is done, then I slowly start creating a box around all of the other words so that I can fill that in with the black marker. This step of the process is a little tedious, and you can be as neat or messy with this as you want. You also don't even have to black it out with a black marker. You could use watercolor, colored pencils, other colors. You could really do anything, but I like to keep it simple, and I like the contrast of the black against the cream colored paper. I think it provides a good amount of contrast, so that's why I like to do it. I ended up creating a little bit of a torn edge at the bottom because I love the look of torn edges, so I decided to tear the edge along the bottom. I also like to create layers, so I'm using a little bit of brown paper here to add layers. This is where the newspaper headline will sit on top, and then I'll have the blackout poem sitting on top of the edge, just so it creates a little bit more interest. And that's pretty much it for this first page of my sketchbook. I wanted it to look like the first page or the first chapter of a book, not just because the actual sketchbook is a book cover, but I just love that idea of starting a new book, a new chapter of your life, of anything. And so that's really what I was going for. And for how the poem ended up turning out, this is how it reads. There was no doubt damage would be done, but she was restless, missed her own carelessness. Now and then she hoped a good deal. And then the title, Wait Till Next Year. If you're interested in these sketchbook art journal type videos, then I will leave a link down below to a playlist of other related videos, and definitely check out the one specifically on blackout poetry.